Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Welcome. Welcome once again to your podcast. This is the XY Spark podcast, the podcast for men, where we seek to normalize conversations about men's mental health, where we seek to break the stamina of the stigma about men's mental health. It is a Wednesday. And the theme is Willpower Wednesday. Willpower Wednesday. And today we will be talking about something that is quite alarming and quite concerning. And that is today we will be talking about domestic violence. Domestic violence or intimate partner violence. This is something that we have to continue to talk about. Why? Because even though it impacts both men and women, what I mean by that is both men and women can be victims of domestic violence. The cases where women are the victims supersedes the cases where men are the victims. And there are many reasons for that. For example, more women are dying versus men. More women are reporting versus men who are reporting. So today we want to talk about domestic violence and how do we seek to stop or prevent domestic violence. Just want to say a shout out to all those who are consistent followers of the XY Spark podcast. We want to acknowledge those who are joining us live on TikTok because right now we're live on TikTok. Shout out to you. We see you, Fred. We see you, Owen. We see you, football fan. We see you guys. Thank you for being here on the XY Spark podcast. We are here every weekday morning between 5:30 and 6 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. If you are in places like Toronto, then you will be 2 hours ahead because you are on Eastern Standard Time and your time is 2 hours ahead of mine. So it will be 7:30 a.m. for you, Eastern Standard. And if you live a little farther east in Canada, you may be 3 hours or 3.5 hours ahead, depending on your geographical location. And so you it may be 8:30 for you a.m. while it's 5:30 for me. If you're in places like British Columbia, depending on where you are, you may be an hour behind me. So it's going to be like 4:30 a.m. for you. If you're in places like Australia, New Zealand, somewhere in Asia, if you're in the UK, hey, I'm not sure what the time difference is, but you can just check it out. But please, you're welcome to join us here on the podcast because we want to talk about domestic violence. And why do we want to talk about this? Because guys, the reality of it is domestic violence is normally perpetrated by men whose mental health is out of sync, or by men who have not been paying sufficient attention to their mental health. And as it deteriorates rapidly, and because of the refusal to seek out support as men, we become perpetrators of domestic violence and we end up hurting a lot of people. And oftentimes it ends up being murder suicides. And why I want to talk about this is, I was listening to the news just last evening and in one province in Canada, this is just one, I'm not talking about all the other reports about domestic violence that came out of Canada. Talking about just one province where they have declared domestic violence a pandemic. Why? Because in the past 3 months, 6 women have been murdered by their partners. And some of those men went to as far as taking their own lives. And so this is a huge concern because we're talking about another mom who is crying and weeping for her daughter. We're talking about kids who no longer have their moms. We're talking about friends who have lost their friends, siblings who have lost their sisters. We're talking about, men who have lost that connection that they want. So we're talking about co-workers who are mourning and community members who are mourning the loss of the life of someone. And all I'm saying to us guys is that as men, we have to take more time to work on ourselves. right? If you're in a relationship, and guys, I'm speaking directly to you now. So if you're live on the podcast, if you're on YouTube, if you're on TikTok, man, I'm speaking to you. And guys, one of the things that I'm not good at is I don't know how to fake things. I have to tell you as I see it. And being a men's life coach and psychotherapist, some of the things that I've realized is a lot of us as men, we are cowards. And let me tell you what I mean when I say we're cowards. A lot of us as men, we are cowards because we know that things are not going well, but we are not coming out of the woodwork to get help. We're cowards, which is why we are in relationships. And I'm going to say this to you guys: if you're in a relationship with somebody and they're staying with you because they are afraid of you, then you have a problem, right? If you're with a woman or whoever you're with, and she is in that relationship with you because she's afraid of you, she doesn't find any favor in you. She doesn't find you someone who helps her to be safe. Then, guys, something is wrong with you. You need to go work on yourself. Guys, if you have friends, if you have buddies, and you realize that their way of conducting themselves in a relationship is to intimidate their partners, to talk down to them, to swear behind them, to be emotionally abusive towards them. If you have a friend, if you have a buddy, and he is physically abusive, you need to tell him to stop that and go work on himself. You see, because the reality of it is that as men, if we're going to prevent or stop domestic violence, it has got to start with you recognizing that your body has a problem, that your brother have a problem, that your father have a problem, so that he can get help. When I look at the report, guys, we're talking about young women at age 22, as young as age 22, who are being whose lives are being taken by men who are insecure. All right. And if you're a man and you're insecure, go work on yourself. You are not ready to be in a relationship, guys. And, guys, here's the truth. I'm not here to try to make friends. I'm here to speak the truth as I see it. And what I'm saying to you, men, is this: you have got to stop this unhealthy practice of abusing our women. Because when we abuse our women, our children who are around, they become recipients of that. And ladies, if you are starting to feel comfortable in abusive relationship, you need to not feel that way. You need to go work on yourself. You need to get out of that relationship, right? That's not a healthy place for you to be either. So what are some of the things that we can do to stop and prevent domestic violence? Because, guys, domestic violence, these oftentimes are repercussions from men who are not healthy, men who are not in a good place, men who are not taking the initiative to get help. Listen, brothers, man, I'm not going to play around here. I'm not going to pretend. I grew up in a home where there was domestic violence, right? I grew up in a home where there was domestic violence. And it was a traumatic thing for me to see. And the thing that I had to learn to do as a man is I had to learn to work on my own self so that I don't become someone who displays those same behaviors. All right. And guys, some of us, we were raised in those environments, but we're not even accepting it. It's a fact. But what you've got to do, guys, you have to break that cycle. If you were in a relationship and it did not work out, right? You have to check yourself and start working on doing things that's going to help you to heal, that's going to help you to recover, that's going to help you to be better. But as you continue that cycle, you end up creating more harm to yourself and to others. Guys, my heart continues to go out to those families, those kids, those moms, those neighbors who are trying to figure out in their minds what happened. And the reality is, what happened is that here is a guy who thought to himself that nobody should be confrontational with him. Here's a guy who thought, hey, you know what? If I'm messing up in my relationship and my partner decides that she doesn't want to be here anymore, she has no right to leave. I own her. Guys, get away from that idea. You are not ready. You don't even own yourself. And you have got to work on your own mental health. Men, I'm saying this to you, that mental health is not a myth, and you have to work on your mental health. If you are in that space where you're feeling, if you're feeling violated, for example, because a lot of guys, a lot of men, I've heard the stories, guys that grew up in a rough neighborhood, and the mindset for a lot of men is that, hey, I was violated, I was disrespected, I did all these things for you, and this is how you repay me. Okay, so it didn't work out. Of course, it hurts. I get it, guys. It hurts. I've been in relationships where I felt that way, but I didn't go off and take things into my own hand. Yes, I've had to learn to lick my wounds. I've had to learn to get professional help, right? I've had to learn to work on myself to get out of that rut that I was in. And if you're in that relationship or you are no longer in it and you're feeling discouraged, you're feeling depressed, you're feeling disrespected, hey, guys, here's another reality. When you go into a relationship, there's no guarantee that it's going to last forever. That's a tough thing to accept, but that's a reality. And what you've got to do, guys, is what? Recognize that. Go into it, do your best, recognize when things are not going well, and seek to bring your partner together and say, hey, let's work on some problem solving. Let's work on having a healthy relationship. And I'm saying this to you guys that today we are having a tough conversation. Why? Because domestic violence, it's too much, guys. We have to do better as men. And this is the reason, guys, why sometimes I hear the stories of men who they end up in the court, for example. And as a man, if you go to court, no judge is going to have partiality on you. Let me tell you why. Because even if you're a good guy, there are those guys out there who they go off and they do things very severe. They take somebody else's life. They take their own life. So imagine you standing in front of a judge and he's looking at you and you're saying, Your Honor, I did nothing. I'm innocent. I'm harmless. Guess what? The guy before you said the same thing and he went off and did something as aggressive as that. So now here is the thing that is tough. Now it has boiled onto a one size fits all. And I'm saying this to you, men, that until we start taking more ownership and learning more how to manage our emotions, learning more how to problem solve, learning more how to ask for help, learning more how to move away from this idea that you always need to be in control, that a woman needs to fear you, that a woman is subject to you. The moment we stay in that place, guys, I'm telling you, we are not going to move away from these unhealthy practices, right? And if you're live here on TikTok, thank you for staying in the conversation. Please keep those likes coming. If you have a comment, please write it in the chat, because we need to keep these conversations going. Guys, I am telling you, I'm so passionate about it, right? Because hey, I have daughters and I have sons, right? And I don't want my daughter to be in a relationship with a guy who is insecure and is going to harm her, is going to hurt her emotionally and psychologically or physically or sexually. He's going to violate her, or he's going to want to control her and she won't be able to have a voice. If you're in a relationship and your partner, you don't believe that your partner should have a voice, you should not be in a relationship. You're not ready. And men, I'm telling you, if we are going to stop and break this wave of domestic violence that's globally, it has to start with you, man. It has to start with me. We have to do something different. That's what I'm saying. Now, let me just reset the room to remind you guys that this is the XY Spark podcast. This is a podcast for men. And here on this podcast, guys, we do have tough conversations. So if you're afraid to have tough, real conversations, this is not the space for you, right? If you jump into this room, for example, and you're hearing something like, I don't want to hear that, it's totally okay. But I'm saying that the conversations that we have here is about men attending to their mental health. It's about men working on breaking the stigma around men's mental health. It's about men recognizing that we have got to break this vicious cycle where we are dying by suicide more and more and more. We're abusing our women, we're abusing our children, we are doing all these things that's hurting the community, and we have to keep the normalize these conversations right here, right now, okay, so that we can break those cycles, right? If you want to hear more episodes like these that talks about men's mental health, please subscribe to our podcast. We're at xyspark.podbean.com. You can go there and listen to more episodes. You can download the episodes. You can join the conversation live as we keep, the space safe, and we keep the space for more men to come in and talk about what's going on. How is your mental health? How is your relationship? All right. I also want to acknowledge all the ladies who joined us here on the podcast. If you're live on TikTok, we appreciate your presence. If you're live on YouTube, thank you for being here on the tube. All right. If you want to join the conversation on the podcast, please come on in and let's chat. And we do offer live life coaching calls right here on the podcast. So we're talking about domestic violence. We are talking about domestic violence. Now, guys, some of the things that cause us to be physically, emotionally, or psychologically abusive to our partners is because we ourselves, as men, we are not in a good space. Listen, guys, one of the big realities is this. All of us, most of us, a great portion of us as men, we want to have, we want to be in relationships. We are naturally drawn towards being in relationships. We want to have someone around us. Men want to do it, women want to do it. There's no shame in it. There are some persons who they have given up on relationships. There are men who have given up on relationships because they're like, no, Rolando, the last time I tried, it never worked out. I end up getting burned. That's the expression. So now I'm done. All right. I get it. All right. But as you continue to feel and experience the pain that came with that disappointment that you received from being in that relationship, I want to say, guys, that's a red flag for you to go and work on yourself. All right. I'm not saying because you're not in a relationship, something is wrong with you. I'm saying if you're scared so much about being in a relationship, then it means that there's some traumatic event, there's something that is going on that you need to go process and work on so that you can heal and you can be healthy. All right. Domestic violence is not something that just happens, right? It stems from so many different things. So many different things that can cause domestic violence, right? I mentioned first earlier insecurity. The next thing is some historical trauma. You might have grown up in a home in an environment like myself where you saw domestic violence almost as if it was normalized. All right. You might have grown up in a neighborhood or a community where you see people being, violent towards each other, and it has been normalized in that community. So now you're thinking, hey, this is it. As a matter of fact, guys, let me tell you something scary. I grew up in an environment where there are women who believe that their men don't care for them if they're not physically abusive. And so men who grew up in these environments, they all of a sudden think that, hey, I have to show this woman that I'm man enough. Guys, listen, a man who has to do that in a relationship, he is not demonstrating real manliness. He's not being a man who is confident. If that's what you feel you need to do to be in control in your relationship, then you're really not in control. It's a false sense of security if that's what you're doing. If your role in your relationship is to intimidate in any way, if your role in your relationship is to say to your partner, you'll be nothing without me. If your role in your relationship is to use financial, how do I say, chains to hold your partner, then you're not in the right spot in your relationship. And men, you have got to address those insecurities. Stop fooling around, guys. Right? The moment someone chooses to be a part of your life, you should see it as an honor, not a privilege. Right? You should see it as, hey, it's great. Someone is trusting me to be a part of their lives. Don't take advantage of your partners. Don't abuse them, guys. We have to stop the domestic violence and we have to move away from this mentality that we have. We have to move away from this idea that we have. Move away from, hey, I want to be in a relationship, to creating a space for a healthy relationship. And having a healthy relationship, guys, means that you have to be in a healthy space and your mindset has got to be in the right place. If you want to really be in that relationship, it starts with you changing your mindset. Move away from these ideas, right? Get help if you're struggling. Stop fooling around, guys. It's too much. I'm saying it to you, men, right now. It is too much. We're hurting our children. We're hurting our women. We're hurting the community. We are creating too much hurt. And we have to stop. That's not our role as men. We're not supposed to be the ones who are harming and hurting the community. We should be the ones who are creating safe spaces in our community. And when we're abusive to our women, when we're abusive to our children, we're not creating safe spaces. Is that your role? No. That's not your role. That's not my role. One professional said it this way. If you are in, let's say if you're married, if you're the husband, you're the house band. You're the one that keeps the family together. That's your role. You are as equally responsible for the emotional atmosphere of your relationship as your partner. Guys, we have to get it together, man. Right? We have to stop playing these games. Right? Mindset makes a man or breaks a man. And if you want to seek to be the best version of yourself, you've got to start getting down to the basics, which is working on your insecurities, working on your traumas, working on your negative thinking patterns, working on some of the meaning that you're giving to some of the things that you're saying. We have to really break the cycle as it relates to the domestic violence and the amount of domestic violence that as men we are perpetrating. We have to stop harming the people in our lives that trust us, the people in our lives that are depending on us. And all I'm saying, guys, is this is here at XY Spark, we just want to make it clear that one of the main reasons why domestic violence is so prevalent in the community is because we have men out there right now who are cowards. We have men out there right now who are fearful. We have men out there right now who are not willing to break the stigma. We have men who are listening to their internal critiques and think that, hey, if I am struggling, I don't want anyone to know about it. We're saying domestic violence is not going to stop until, as men, we stop bottling things up. Domestic violence is not going to stop until, as men, we stop overusing drugs and alcohol. Domestic violence is not going to stop until, as men, we get professional help to improve our mental health. Domestic violence is not going to stop, guys, until we work on ourselves. And I'm not saying work on ourselves one time and stop. I'm saying making it a lifestyle choice where you're working on yourself and where you're taking the time to recognize when you're out of sync and do the work. And that's the piece, guys. Do the work, right? So many of us out there, so many of you as men, you work so hard. You work hard on everything else but yourself. This is why we lose out and we flip our tops and we end up hurting the people who trust and are depending on us. Listen, guys, the domestic violence that is happening in our world, in our country, we're going to break that cycle today. Yes, I'm saying it. You can break that cycle today. I can break that cycle today. It's going to start with us, both of us, working together to do it, right? The next thing that you're going to need to do if we're going to break the vicious cycle of domestic violence is, and this appeal goes out to all our community agencies and professionals. We have to work hard on creating a safe space where men can come out and say, hey, I need help. I'm struggling with my mental health. Listen, guys, these conversations are going to continue, right? This is your boy, your men's life coach, Rolando. You're in tune to XY Spark Podcast. This is the podcast for men where we continue to have conversations about men's mental health. And today it's Willpower Wednesday. And as you go off, I want you to take the initiative to initiate the willpower to break the vicious cycle of self harm and self hate and start practicing self love and self respect, right? I want you to get into that mindset, guys, where we are going to break away from these behaviors that is harming our families and harming our community. So, as you're listening to this podcast, I'm not sure where you are located around the planet, but I just want to encourage you to remember this, that at XY Spark, we believe that there is a spark in you. Until we see you next time, please remember, like, share, subscribe, and comment. You can listen to our podcasts again on Spotify, on iTunes, on Amazon Music. You can listen to it on the Podbean app. You can follow our YouTube channel, XY Spark, or Instagram or TikTok. Until next time, thank you for being here with us. We appreciate your time and your presence. And we will see you again real soon as tomorrow morning at 5:30 for another one of our podcasts. We will see you again next time. You be safe.